Hi there, ladies and gents. As promised, today we're going to do another pixel art tutorial, and this time I've actually chosen the 32x32 resolution. This here, of course, is 4 times larger than the 16x16. If you have a look at these squares here, each of these squares is the 16x16. So what I'm trying to say is, if you upgrade to the 32x32 resolution, you've actually got 4 times as much work. But I wanted to show you this resolution anyway. Now, I said I was going to do a lesson on shading and form. Now, at this resolution, as well as in the 16x16, every single pixel that you place is going to have an impact on the image. And let's just show you first of all the shading part of it. Now imagine we've got a cube. I'll just do a quick cube first so that you can see what I'm on about. Right, there's the cube. Now if we wanted to fill this in, what you would be aiming to do would be a lighter colour, have another side another colour, and have the darker shade on another side. That might look a little bit too much, so let's see what happens if we do it that way. That would be a little bit better. Of course, it's very simplistic when you're speaking about a cube. So, let's do something a little different, shall we? If we have a circle, we're going to use like one of the mid-tones here. And bearing in mind when you use that, you just have to be a little bit careful, because sometimes you get ones that are not quite so good. Oh, damn it, I didn't mean to get rid of that as well. Right, now as you can see, that's a circle, but what we will aim to do here is turn this into a sphere. Now on the sphere you would have highlights and you would have shade. Now if we imagine that the light source is coming down from here. Now what you don't want to do is just put a couple of pixels there, because you want this shape to look a little bit more 3D. So we can put the highlight there. And then we have to look at the shading. Now have a look at what I'm going to do here. That is what you don't want. That's a technique that people call pancake shading. If you do just that, then it's going to look flat. And if you want an object to look flat, by all means, but generally speaking, that's not how you would want this object to look. So what we need to do here is make it a little bit more rounded so that you've got a bigger shaded area. Of course, you can tweak the placement of the pixels until it's pretty much what you want. Let's say like that. And then you would get your darkest one. Oh, oops. And you would go over the places where the very darkest colour would actually reach. And when you zoom out a little, you can see the effect of that immediately. That does look like more of a 3D shape rather than a 2-dimensional shape. That's obviously what you would want. So let's get rid of that. Now then, if we're going to draw something in this resolution, and we want something like, say, for instance, let's do a bed. I mean, that's a common sort of thing that you would find in the majority of games. So let's go to the brown colour and let's get our rectangle tool. Yeah, and we'll make it a little bit like that. And of course I'm going to do a space here for the headboard. Now what we can do here to make it obvious that this is a bed, can first of all do that. Then for the headboard, let's make it a little bit more like an actual headboard. Just imagine a headboard on any bed that you're aware of. So, no, not like that. Oh, why is it oh, yeah, of course. Ignore that, that's me being really silly. Of course, you tweak the pixels until they are what you would want them to be. So, yeah, that's more like the shape of a usual headboard. Now, of course, on this part here, because everything at the top here is going to be lighter, everything that's at the bottom shall be darker. So, what we'll do, we'll just grab the darker brown and we can go over the parts here which would be in the shade. There we are. And this would be facing away from the light as well. So let's put the shade on the headboard section also. And down here like this. Now as you can see, I've left the top pixel there as it is. The reason for that is, of course, you want to give it a bit more of a 3D effect, and I should have done so on this, to be honest. So if I do that, then that looks actually a bit more three-dimensional. Now the next part you have to do is the actual bedding. Oh, just thinking, if I do it like that, it looks a bit more consistent, because we can't have that side up here being 1 pixel and that being 2 pixel. I think that might just look a bit too weird. So now I've done that, we're going to do the actual bed. Now let's imagine we're going to have a red one. And what we can do here is do it like that. And say we've got a lighter undercoat here. Actually, that might be a bit too bright. So if we put it like... Actually, no, sometimes... Yeah, that'll do. No, it won't. Sometimes it takes a little bit of trial and error just to get it right. Let's put that like that. There, this is looking better. Or we could have an undersheet of a different colour, maybe something that's softer like that. And we can now do a pillow. Now, what I would recommend if you're going to do a pillow, let's start off with the grey. And we're going to try and make this pillow look a little bit more 3D. So, if we start off like this, remember we're going to do it like that. Just thinking. No, that is right for the actual shape of the pillow. But on this here, that might cause an issue. So we'll do that colour. And what we need to do here is just put some highlights everywhere that wouldn't naturally be shaded. So if we had it like that, and you can even have as though somebody slept on it. And again, when you have a look at this, you could ruffle the sheets a little bit. It just gives it that semi sort of slept in look. Make it go a little bit more like that. And that'll give it a better look. As you can see from that there, that's looking pretty decent as a bed, but I'm not so sure I'm happy with that orange, to be fair. I could actually make it a very dark bottom sheet. Of course, then that conflicts with that. Of course, when it comes to pixel art, you just have to keep on tweaking things until you're sure that you've got something that looks right. That looks reasonably good, but again, you look at that and it could be wood. You'd even go for a darker grey. That's looking fairly decent. Or let's just do that and then get just a moment. Yeah, that's looking decent as well, but no, not so sure on the colour for the bottom sheet, to be fair. You could use pretty much anything that you wanted, but the white actually doesn't look too bad. From a distance you can see that that would be a pillow. Just one moment. It's not looking quite so 3D now, unfortunately. That's the only issue with using that. The only other way to really get around this would be to turn all this into the darker colour and then have the lighter colour there, so you've got a red pillow. You could of course do it that way. If you did that, I keep on doing that still, and of course you can just keep tweaking it and changing things up until you're happy with the result. That's fairly decent. If you wanted to, you can also have it where, say, a piece of this comes up here and you do that there, just so as it looks a little bit like that. And you can have, because remember this here is coming over the edge a bit, could put some bits there like that. It would basically give it a little bit more. The only other thing you could do if you didn't want to do that, there's another technique as well which gives it a little bit more of a 3D effect. There we go. That looks like the end of a bed there. That looks fairly decent. So that'd be like a piece of furniture. Okay, now we're going to get rid of this here, because you've got to remember the perspective. I mean, everything I'm doing here is like from a more top-down perspective. So let's think of another kind of thing that you would commonly see in a game. I mean, we did a house last time. This time we'll do actually a full-on tree. So the first thing you have to consider there is the trunk. Now you know that obviously that a trunk doesn't just go straight up, straight down like this. So you want to give it a little bit more of a realistic look. So if we go something like that, that looks pretty decent. And of course you want branches on the tree. So we can do some branches. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. If you think about a tree in real life, it wouldn't be looking absolutely perfect. That's not how trees go. And of course you do some branches out here. Remember to put your pixels in different places. You just give it a little bit more of a realistic look. Because remember, when you first start out doing this, you've got to try and make it look as realistic as you can for pixel art anyway. So there we go, that's looking like a decent outline for a tree. Now the next thing you have to think of is, where will the clusters of leaves actually be? So what we're going to do is have a look at the greens, and if we take this mid sort of green here, actually if we take the darker one first, because we're going to use the darker colour as a background. So because it gives you the impression as this is the darker parts that wouldn't usually be seen visibly. So it doesn't need to be on every tiny little piece, but this gives us something to work on. So we just block fill in these first of all. Now that's starting to look a little bit more realistic. That's like for the shading part. And then we're going to get the next one up, the next colour up. And if you remember what we did when I did the small bush in the very first tutorial, this is what we're going to do. We don't want 13. No, 3 is too large. 2. And we start making leaves. All over the tree. Actually, put it like that. Now I'm deliberately leaving some branches so that you can actually see still where the tree would naturally have branches, because if you think about a real tree and you have a look at it, you're still going to be able to see some branches. That's just the nature of a tree. Now you can see why I put the background in, because there will be parts of the tree where you obviously can't see every single part of it. You can't actually see all of the twigs, but it's giving you the idea that those twigs are there. And if you have a look at these do look like leaves, which for the purposes of this is exactly what we want. And then we go down to a single pixel and we get the next one up. And what we can start to do now is to just put the highlights on the leaves where you would naturally see them. Actually, put that like that. It just gives the tree a little bit more of a natural look. And when you have a look at that, that's looking quite reasonable at the moment. Although you can add some additional spots in if you feel that there are areas that would benefit from them. Because it's quite important to make sure that some of the highlights will be fairly random. Okay. Now what we can additionally do is get the very lightest colour, and on some of the spots where you've actually put the previous colour, just go over them with this, the very lightest. That gives it that little bit more. See, when we look at it more from a distance, that's looking pretty natural now. It's looking pretty good. And the next thing you have to bear in mind here would be the trunk of the tree. Of course, we know they aren't all one colour. So we'll get the shade, and usually we would shade things more from this side. And we'll get, if we just put that pixel in there, and do a bit there, and a bit there. And for some of these on the inside of the tree, these branches, you've got to remember these would be in shade. So we fill these parts in, except for the ones there that would have access to direct sunlight. If the pixel has access to direct sunlight, light outside, don't colour it. If it doesn't, and this wouldn't because it's low down, so we fill in all of these pixels in the darker colour. Again, that's looking a bit more natural, and you want to use an even lighter tone just for the very highlights. These are the ones that would be exposed to the sun if it was coming from above, whereas these would not. And you would want to do a little bit of that tone on this side here, lower down of course, because as you realise that the top branches there, they would be with more sunlight, and as you can see, that'll give you your complete tree. You can have them different shapes if you want to, and depending on what sort of tree you do, you know, you would perhaps use a different tone. Perhaps you would use something a little bit more shifted towards the blue if you were doing, say, you know, a pine tree or something like that. Whereas if you wanted something that looked like it was in a savanna, you might go for a more yellowy sort of green. That's the reason why on a palette where you've got lots of colours, you make sure you have plenty of greens available. That palette there's one of my own creations. And what you could additionally do to give it a little bit more of the 3D effect, we just grab this green here, and we could make these down here, we could do a little bit extra, making it a bit darker. Because if you think about it, these areas here, they would be more shaded, especially if the light was coming from this angle. So we're going to do a little bit of additional shading down here. It just gives it a little bit more of an overall shape, because you've still got the highlights, and we can even do a little bit of extra highlighting up here. The purpose of this is to basically give it that little bit more. And you might want to do for a couple of sections that's actually inside. There we are. And just the lightest colour a little more here. As you can see, that's looking a little bit more 3D now. You've got more of an idea. And when you have a look at this area here, you want a a little more of that dark, well, medium dark. Let's just break this up a little. Do that there, just break it up a little bit. And up here. So what you don't want is massive sections of the dark. Actually, down there you probably do. There we are. That'll do it. And that, ladies and gents, is how you would do a tree. Now, if you want to add some fruit onto the tree, I don't know if 2 pixels be too big for this. No, that will actually be fine. So what we're going to do is just add a few berries. Actually, no, try to make it so that they're not quite so aligned. Now we can have a shade. Let's knock that down to 1 pixel. And for the shade, you only want to do this corner. And for the highlight, just this corner. And that gives them more of a 3D effect, even though each fruit is only 4 pixels. And when you look at that from a distance, as it would be if it was in an actual game, so imagine you were looking at it from that distance, you can very clearly see what this entire object is, and you can also see that it has fruit. You know what it is. You can do similar for flowers and things like that. I mean, you could do cherry blossoms. If you wanted to, you could change this entire green tree. I'll just get rid of these for a moment. What you would do here, if you wanted to make it into cherry blossoms, get the darkest colour of this, and hold on, I know there's a method of doing this. Right, oh, I made a little bit of a mistake there. It's not that colour that we want to do. What we're going to do now actually would be to paint all of these darkest ones. So you can see what you would do. It to be exactly the same process if you're making a cherry tree, but this is one way of ensuring that you can actually use the same sort of asset, recolour that asset, and turn it into something that looks a little bit different if you wanted one for a different environment, or if you just wanted to spice things up that little bit so that everything isn't too samey. It doesn't matter with some styles if it's samey, but you know, if you're wanting something where there's a little more variance, then that might matter to you. It can be a little bit of a pain in the bum having to click on all these pixels, but I know there is a way of doing all of them at once, but for some reason that method escapes me at the moment. You can see where the darker ones versus the lighter ones are. Oops. It's very easy to click on the wrong pixel, and of course you get the lightest ones. I hate it when I hit the wrong one. And as you can see, that looks more like a kind of cherry blossom. So with that in mind, oh, having a look here, right at the bottom, I mean, you could tweak the individual pixels as much as you needed to, just to get everything exactly as you would want it to be. So if we put it like that, it's a bit of a highlight there, perhaps a single pixel there. And I would say that I'd be happy with that. So what I'll do here, again, not in palettes. So I'll use this shading tutorial, so you've been able to see how I've done this. And for next time, we'll actually show you how to do a sprite. And the setup that we're going to use, we'll use a 16 by 16 for the purposes of the tutorial, but again, you can scale up to any other measurements if you wanted to. It'd depend on which game engine you're using, actually, because some game engines are tied into one particular resolution, others not so much. There's quite a lot that will allow you to choose your resolution, but if you have something like RPG Maker, it'd depend on which version you actually have, because MV and MZ, they both have 48 by 48, you're tied into that. If you've got VX or VX Ace, you're tied into 32 by 32. And of course, if you've got any of the old school ones, like the version they used to use for Windows XP, I believe that's 16 by 16. So again, you really should decide first of all which resolution you need before you start doing your pixel art, because having to redo everything because you've used the wrong resolution is not the ideal way to go about things. You do have some newer engines like RPG Architect, which is brilliant, by the way. If you've ever used MV3D on RPG Maker MV, you might want to switch to RPG Architect, because it's got a lot more to it. You've got a lot more options than you have with RPG Maker, including being able to choose your resolution. And you can actually do 3D much more easily than what you can with RPG Maker with MV3D. I mean, I'm not knocking MV3D at all, it's an absolutely brilliant plugin, but you've got more options, especially when it comes to things like battle systems, and it'll do it natively, and it's also good for people, you know, to learn something new that gives you extra features as well. And of course, I'm not only going to be doing about pixel art, there's also, you know, voxel art that I'm going to show you as well. But I mean, at the moment we're going to go through the pixel art, and we can go through the voxel art later. But what I will show you in the next tutorial is how to set up a sprite sheet for NPCs, and that's going to apply to RPG Maker and RPG Architect. There may be other engines that these sprite sheets will be suitable for, but I'm going to use that standard layout that we would use in those two engines. An RPG Architect will allow for 8 directional sprites, but I'll do the standard 4 directional sprite to give you an idea of what it's like. I'll show you how to set up a template as well, which is going to actually make it much easier for you for when it comes to actually doing more than one sprite. It'll just make your job that little bit easier, so you're not sort of going from scratch each time. You can use the template. Okay, I'll let you go for now, and I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial. Bye for now.